Hello, friends. Welcome back to our show. Are you enjoying yourself today, Teena? Are you having fun?
I am having fun. I'm always having fun. I
Oh,
know
that's
sometimes I
nice.
look like I just showed up like, do. Here I am. Tell me what's going on.
Are we filming today? Oh my God! Hi. No, not at
Oh,
all.
man. But yeah, I'm
No.
having.
Um. Well, good. I'm glad you're having fun. We're gonna do a new segment now, and this really is a new segment. We've been talking about things for so long, but this one actually
Yeah.
is a new segment. And we're gonna include it in our format for the coming episodes. I think it's important for us to do a little bit of a flashback segment. We are Generation X, right? Generation X has points of view, has a lifestyle, has everything else that you can imagine, and we don't talk about it too much on this
Right.
pod. So I think we should introduce that a little bit and throw it back to our days, our glory
Of
days.
course.
So today I thought we would talk about a topic that hasn't really been heard since the 80s, but it was certainly part of Generation X. So let's talk about the Latchkey Kid.
Ooh.
The Latchkey Kid. Do you remember that term?
I
Teena?
do remember that term. So
What do you know about it?
latchkey kids were kids who had to go home, and they went home to an empty house because their parents both worked, or maybe they had a single mom or single dad situation. And they had their key. Their key usually was somewhere they weren't going to lose it, especially if they were younger, so that's 6, 7, 8 years old. So around their necklace or tied to the inside of their backpack or something. And then they were to go in. You always got very specific instructions. You come into the house, you lock the door behind you. You can have a snack. Do not turn on the oven. Do not answer the phone. And you can watch TV.
Don't answer the door if anyone comes.
Don't answer the door if anybody comes. You can watch TV and work and do your homework, and that was it. And then usually your parent, everybody's situation was different, but usually the parents would be home about dinner time, and then everything else.
Right.
But you had
5:36-ish,
that time on your own. And I think the kids that experienced that in our generation, I just think they grew up a little quicker, yes, but I think they just were more independent.
Definitely.
So what was your experience with that?
Well, I was 100% a latchkey kid. I was right there from the get-go. I remember walking home in 6th grade. I have visual memory of walking home in 5th grade. Also, I think, what am I saying? I think I definitely walked home during those times. During 5th grade, I think was when the latchkey part started. I was raised by a single mom she had 2 kids, me and my brother, and my brother's a year and a half behind me. And so I was probably, I don't know, what is 5th or 6th grade? Is that, I don't even know, 10,
somewhere
11?
Around there, yeah.
8? I don't know, whatever that is. And I had to walk home 2 miles probably from our school. We would walk out the back of the school, cross, we lived in the desert at the time. In the 80s, there was nothing. It's all developed now, but you could literally walk out the back of the school and you were in what we call a wash, which is a big, dry desert ditch that fills with flood water when it needs to. And you walk across the wash to just several blocks for a couple miles to your house. And we would get home probably around 2:30. My mother wouldn't get home until around 5:30. I was responsible for getting my brother situated, but we didn't really, I didn't take that responsibility too seriously because he was pretty sustaining at that age. He came in and got a snack. We got a snack. We sat down and watched cartoons, and that was pretty much it. We weren't allowed to leave. We weren't allowed to talk on the phone. We could not start the stove. We couldn't do any of that stuff. And we sat and watched TV and did homework until our mom came home. And we never, ever, ever had a problem. I broke the sliding glass door one time because I kicked it on accident. It was when we got older and we were teenagers, my brother and I would fight like dogs. And that was when we really couldn't be left alone. But when we were younger, we were fine.
When you were 6 and 9, you were fine. But when you became 16 and
16,
it was like, whoa.
It was a different time. I don't really know if I have any negative feelings about it. I have some information here about the psychological ramifications of the latchkey kid life, of course. But before we go down that route, let me tell you this. Do you know where the term latchkey comes from? Obviously, we know what it means, but do you know where it comes from?
I don't know where it comes from.
Why they're using it? It comes from Canada. Canada, of all places. The term refers to the latchkey of a door to a house or an apartment, right? Which we know. The key is often strung around the child's neck or left hidden under a mat, like you said. The term seems first to appear in a CBC radio program called Discussion Club. Topic: How War Affects Canadian Children in 1942. So, due to the phenomenon of children being left home alone during World War II, when the father was enlisted and the mother had to go out and get a job, this group that's talking about, let's see, what did they say? Given the fact that the show, the discussion club participants are all familiar with the term, it alludes to it being a colloquial usage that's been in use since at least 1942. Which I was like, wow, we didn't hear about it until the 80s, but it was a term coined in 1942 because of children affected by war. Same exact idea. They would end up home alone until the mother came home from school. And then, of course, the 80s came up and we had all these, latchkey kids doing what they do. And the question became, what happens to these children? Is this good? Is this bad? Is this what's going to happen? Well, it's been 40 years or so. It's been a long time. And there is some evidence to suggest that latchkey kids did grow up more independent. They did grow up more self-reliant. However, it was probably at the expense of some social adjustments. They don't have as much self-esteem, which I found really fascinating. They have trust issues. They may resent their parents and resent being the resentment of being forced to grow up too fast. And they have, let's see what it said here. If the children experience latchkey life during their early teens, there's a greater susceptibility to peer pressure, potentially resulting in such behavior as alcohol abuse, drug abuse, sexual promiscuity, and smoking. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened to me. I did not have those problems, but I was a latchkey kid, and they're saying that some of us may have fallen into peer pressure a bit more. If it happened to younger students, middle school students, which is where Eric and I were, they have higher reported levels of behavioral problems, higher rates of depression, and lower levels of self-esteem. Fascinating. I don't know if I agree with any of that. I mean, I do, but I wasn't traumatized by being a latchkey kid. I remember the first time doing it being nervous, no doubt, for sure. But I was kind of excited about it. There was going to be no one there. It was just kind of...
Yeah, and I'll say mine was a little different. So I wasn't so much a latchkey kid in that we came home from school and nobody was there and whatever. But I did get left alone a lot. So it was more of I'm going to run to the store. I'll be back, or I have to go here, or I have to go there. So probably the same amount of time, between an hour and 2 hours, depending on what was going on, in the not answering the phone, or if it's an emergency, I'll call, let it ring once, hang up, call back, or whatever it was. So I don't know about that. I do know that it's interesting to say that there's mental health issues related to this, because our generation was the one that's like, what's mental health issues? It was like, walk it off. You're fine. Suck it up. What are you crying over? Do you want me to give you something to cry about?
Walk it off.
Yeah, it's just, we didn't, there wasn't a lot of that. I think it's great the way the younger generations are embracing that kind of stuff and being like, hey, this is not okay. Where we were just basically like, suck it up. You gotta do what you gotta do.
Suck it up.
And we don't want to hear you bitch about it. With my family, it was there's other people with bigger problems. There's not, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
You think you got it so bad. And I think that's why one of the things I say sometimes is, like, if something happens and someone's like, oh, it's okay. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? If that's the worst thing that happens to me, it's still a pretty good day. That's right. We do. We as a generation have a very specific view on life. It can always be worse. We have seen it be worse, and if this is the worst it's going to be, that's great. We are. In fact, this says right here, in 2004, there was a marketing study done with members of Generation X who claimed that we went through our all-important formative years as one of the least parented, least nurtured generations in U.S. history. Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely correct.
And I think the least nurtured really hits the nail on the head, because I have really gone out of my way to do things differently with my children. And not that my parents did the best they could with what they had, right? And so when you know better, you do better, and all of that stuff. Right. But we weren't very lovey-dovey as a family. I can't even remember ever one time my mom telling me she loved me. I know she did, but I can't pull that out of my memory anywhere. I'm sure it happened a lot more when I was little. And then as I got older, I haven't heard her say that to me in years. But to be fair, I haven't said it to her in years either. You know what I mean? So,
okay.
And it's not that I don't love her. I do love her, but we just don't talk like that. And it was never, hey, you're doing a good job, or I'm so proud of you. I mean, we didn't get talked to like that. And so, I mean, I honestly can't remember getting a lot of support when I did extracurricular activities. My parents didn't come to that stuff. It wasn't a big family
Wow.
affair. It wasn't,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
made a point to do all of those things for my kids and not necessarily to like overcall them, but my kids know I love them and I tell them regularly.
Yeah.
And I'll tell
Yeah.
them sometimes and they're like, yes, we know. I'm like, did I tell you I loved you today? They're like, already 4 times, stop. And I'm like, okay, but I
Stop
just want you
telling
to
us.
know. And,
Yeah.
and
So
when they
sweet.
have things, my kids are like, you don't have to come. Jackson was going to do something with robots. It ended up not working out, but I'm like, when is it? I want to go. I want to go see. He's like, you don't have to come. And I'm like, I don't have to come, but I want to come,
I want
Yeah.
to.
So
I want to.
there's things that I definitely did differently, and not that I feel, ripped off as a child, but I know how it would have made me feel if I would have gotten a little bit more of that. And so I wanted to make sure that my
Hmm.
kids felt that way. So I
Sure.
definitely would say
Did you
least coddled,
least
least
nurtured?
nurtured. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever did they ever experience Latchkey Kid or a version of that themselves? How old were they when you started leaving them alone to take care of themselves for, an hour or two or whatever it was?
Older, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
They because the way that it worked out was that my kids always had my mother-in-law to go to when they were younger. So they went
Right.
to
That's
elementary
right.
school literally a block from her house. She could step out onto
And
her
into
lawn.
grandma's
Yeah, she
house.
could step out on her lawn and see them walking, leaving the school grounds and coming to her house. So it wasn't really
That's
necessary.
great.
They did get left, I would say, gosh, probably 10, 11. By the first time I'm like, I'm going to run out real quick and I'll be right back. And I stressed out about it the
Hmm.
whole time.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to come back and the house is going to be on fire. But
Right.
now, I mean, I'd say for the last 2 or 3 years, they can stay overnight by themselves. They're very
Well,
self-sufficient. They're
they're 30 now. So
But I mean, they get along well enough
okay.
to make sure that they eat and that
Yeah.
they take care of stuff. I mean, is the house clean when I come home? No, but they've eaten, and
It wouldn't be if it were their own house either,
that's
if that
true.
makes you
I
feel any
know
better. If they lived on their own, it wouldn't be clean either. So
that is true.
uh remember my junior year, my dad was getting divorced and he was working out of town
Oh
5 days
yeah.
a week
Mm-hmm.
and was only home on the weekends. And so my brother and I, my entire junior year, Eric was a freshman, I was a junior, lived alone Monday through Friday. My dad left Monday morning, came back Friday night, and with money on the counter to buy food and take care of things for the week. And we did it for an entire year. Almost. And well, we had a blast. We had so much fun during that time. I had a great
We
time.
really did.
And Eric had a great time too. But we were good kids. Eric went to school. I didn't, until it was brought to my attention that literally, if you don't finish school, you're not ever leaving here. You're not going to graduate. And I was like, oh
Word.
God, if you don't start showing up to school, you're not going to graduate. But yeah, we had a blast doing that. And so I've always been very, very independent. I've
Yeah.
always been very self-assured, willing to take care of myself, all these things. I think it all came from those experiences as a kid. But do I think there was some some things that were neglected because of it? Yes, absolutely, I
Mhm.
do. Yeah, absolutely. But we were a generation that went through it. Here we are
Yeah,
today.
and the nurturing.
High rates of anxiety and
Yeah,
depression.
exactly. The nurturing undiagnosed ADHD because no one was paying attention to me.
That's right.
all.
Anxiety. Hello.
But yeah, so
yeah.
we, I think where it came through the most as far as the non-nurturing or the where everybody says nobody cared about us, but it was the playing outside. So I don't know if you had that same experience, but we were, on the weekends or even in the evenings when we got home from school, it was, you guys need to go outside and stay outside. None of this running back and forth. We're not paying to put AC out into the whole world or whatever the excuse was. But we would disappear for hours on a Saturday. Are you kidding me? And not be seen. We'd just be left to our own devices. And so that was, it was fun, but it was also kind of not at the same time, depending on the situation, because, it wasn't just us. It was our whole generation of kids that were all thrown out. So there's just bands of kids roaming the neighborhoods. And sometimes your bully was out there. And sometimes, you know what I mean? Sometimes it was all cool.
Yeah, so there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
I didn't, we certainly experienced that in that when we would be out, you had to be home by the time the streetlights came on. We lived in an apartment complex, huge apartment complex at one point. And that's kind of when my memory starts of coming home when the lights were on. But we weren't of the household that said you had to get out and stay out. I had friends like that, and that always made me incredibly uncomfortable.
Really?
Like they're, oh no, we can't go inside. We're not allowed inside. And I was like, you're not allowed inside. Like I had friends whose mom was like, door is locked. You're not coming back in until.
Yes.
Really? That makes me so sad and uncomfortable.
My parents didn't lock the door, but Jack grew up, with his cousins. Right. So him and his brother are like 9 years apart. So when he was younger, he grew up with his cousins, and his aunt would put them out of the house, lock the door. So if they needed to use the bathroom, too bad. Right. So because they're boys, they could just pee in the backyard or whatever. I don't know. Right, so what they would do, he told me, is they would leave his cousins, because one of his cousins had a bottom floor, because it was a 2-story house. One of them had a bottom floor bedroom and one of them had an upstairs bedroom. And so the bottom floor room, before they went out for the day, they would crack the window so they could come in, go to the bathroom, and then they'd go back out. But yeah, that was it. The doors were locked. Yeah, that was the parents' alone time.
That's just like, what an awful. You're not allowed in your own home. There's nothing
really
safe.
Think about that like that.
I think I did though. I remember my one friend named Doug, who that happened to. I remember being like,
"Are you okay,
uncomfortable and scared about this?" I was like, "You're not allowed." He's like, "No, we'll be out here for." I was like, "For like 6 more hours, or whatever it was."
Yeah, you could go home for lunch and then you were kicked back out again. Yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely did not experience that, but I did experience the go out, come home before the lights are on, just be gone for.
Why do you think so many of us drank out of the hose? We weren't allowed to go inside and get something to drink.
That's our only option. I had
Turn
no
that
choice.
hose on. You gotta let it run for a little while because it's hot initially when it first comes out. But after a few minutes, after I don't know, 30, 45 seconds, then it's cold and you can take a nice good long drink.
Exactly. Oh, wow. All right. Well, I think that's a lovely trip down memory lane. It's time for us to get out of the Wayback Machine and come back to reality. But I think we should do this segment every week. Not this segment, no, but I think we should do a nostalgia thing. I think next podcast we're going to talk about maybe what did we used to do for fun in the 80s that isn't around anymore. Do you remember lawn darts?
I do not remember lawn darts, but Jack has a story about how he almost killed one of his cousins.
Yes, of course he did. Either on purpose or on accident.
Purpose.
We'll never know.
No, okay. We know. It was on purpose.
We definitely know. Yeah. Things like that. Things that were weapons. We'll talk about things that were fun, like arcades and roller skating and all those kinds of things. So we're gonna incorporate some of the
running through the sprinklers.
Nostalgia.
Do people do that anymore?
Slip and slides. Do you remember the concussions?
I do, but I'm talking about just putting the sprinklers on and running through. One of those sprinkler things that did this back and forth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's just fun to go hop.
Yeah. Oh God,
hop,
we didn't.
Up.
The ability to entertain ourselves. We'll talk about it later, but the ability to entertain ourselves does not exist today. I don't think.
Oh my God, these kids today. Oh my God, did I really say that? They wouldn't know what to do if the power went out. For good. Like they just wouldn't, they would lose their mind and we'd be out playing in the mud.
Probably 2 or 3 times a year the power goes out and we're just like, okay, but it's not out for very long. But my kids will usually come out and go, great, now we got to talk to each other. And I'm like, yeah, you do.
Now you do. In fact, speaking of your kids, we'll see you at the next segment, which is The Adventures of Being Teena.
Bye.
It's Teena's turn to talk now.